Have you ever extended your hand in kindness only to have it slapped away? Have you felt the sting of rejection when all you offered was compassion? Today's narrative explores the raw wound of being dismissed for your faith, the crushing weight of watching someone suffer while they refuse your help, and the unexpected miracle that unfolds when pride finally crumbles before desperate need. This is a story about persistence in love, about the grace that waits patiently even when doors slam shut, and about how the most hardened hearts can crack open in a single moment of unbearable pain. Widow carries worn Bible at twilight. Naomi Brennan was 42 years old the autumn her neighbor decided she was an irritating nuisance worth avoiding. She wore simple cotton dresses in muted colors, modest hemlines that brushed her knees, and a small silver cross that hung from a delicate chain around her neck. The cross had belonged to her grandmother, passed down through 3 generations of praying women, and Naomi touched it often without thinking, a reflex of faith as natural as breathing. Her dark hair, streaked with the first silver threads of middle age, was usually pulled back in a practical bun, though loose strands escaped to frame a face marked by both sorrow and stubborn hope. She was neither beautiful nor plain, but rather possessed the kind of quiet steadiness that made children trust her, and strangers feel oddly comforted in grocery store lines. Her husband Thomas had died 7 years earlier, a heart attack at 38, that the doctors said was tragically rare but not unheard of in men with his particular genetic markers. Naomi had weathered that storm with her faith mostly intact, though there had been dark months when she had knelt beside her bed at 3 in the morning, whispering angry questions into the darkness that never seemed to answer back. She had emerged from that grief different, softer in some ways and harder in others, with a conviction that life was both more fragile and more precious than she had understood before. She lived alone now in the small 2-story house on Maple Street, though her daughter Rebecca visited every Sunday after church services. Rebecca was 19, attending the state university 40 minutes away, studying to be a teacher like her father had been. The house felt too large most days, its empty rooms echoing with memories of family dinners and Christmas mornings and all the ordinary moments that had seemed unremarkable until they were gone. Naomi kept herself busy with work at the library, with her church community, with the vegetable garden out back that produced more tomatoes and zucchini than one person could reasonably consume. And she prayed. Every morning at dawn, every evening before bed, and countless times throughout the day when she felt the nudge to lift someone up in her thoughts. She kept a prayer journal, a cloth-bound book with pages filled in her careful handwriting, listing names and concerns and small gratitudes. The journal had become precious to her, a record of conversations with the divine that sometimes felt one-sided, but which she continued faithfully regardless. Her new neighbor had moved into the house next door in late August, a man named Victor Salazar, who appeared to be in his mid-50s, though Naomi was not entirely certain. He was thin, almost gaunt, with sharp features and iron-grey hair cropped close to his skull. His eyes were dark and guarded, and he moved with the careful, controlled manner of someone who had learned not to draw attention to himself. He wore well-tailored clothing even for yard work, expensive button-down shirts and pressed trousers that seemed oddly formal for suburban weekends. Naomi noticed he drove a newer model sedan, black and immaculately clean, and that he came and went at irregular hours, sometimes leaving before dawn and returning well after midnight. She had approached him 3 days after he moved in, carrying a still warm apple pie covered with foil. It was what neighbors did, what her mother had done, what she had always done. She had knocked on his door at 6 in the evening, a reasonable hour, and waited with a smile prepared. Victor Salazar had opened the door with visible annoyance, his expression souring further when he saw the pie. "Yes?" His voice was clipped, impatient. "Hello, Mr. Salazar. I am Naomi Brennan, your neighbor to the left. I wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood." She had extended the pie. "I baked this today. Apple with cinnamon. I hope you like apples." He had stared at the pie as if she were offering him a live snake. "I do not eat sugar," he said flatly, "or processed flour, and I prefer to keep to myself. Thank you." The door had closed with a decisive click, leaving Naomi standing on his porch, holding the rejected pie like a fool. She had stood there for a long moment, feeling her cheeks burn with embarrassment, before walking slowly back to her own house. She had set the pie on her kitchen counter and stared at it, this symbol of her failed neighborliness, before cutting herself a slice and eating it mechanically. The pie was good. She was a decent baker, had been since her mother taught her at age 12. The crust was flaky, the filling sweet and tart in perfect balance. Victor Salazar had rejected something good, and that stung in a way she had not quite expected. But Naomi Brennan was not easily discouraged. She had weathered far worse than a surly neighbor, so she tried again. 2 weeks later, she saw him struggling to carry heavy boxes from his car to his front door, clearly needing help. She walked over immediately. "Can I give you a hand with those?" "No." He did not even look at her. "They look heavy." "I am stronger than I appear." I said no. His tone was ice. She had retreated, but she continued to try in small ways. She waved when she saw him. He never waved back. She offered to collect his mail when he traveled. He told her he had already made arrangements. She mentioned the block party planned for October. He said he would not be attending. Each rejection was delivered with the same cold efficiency, as if she were a door-to-door salesman peddling something offensive. Her friend Celia from church had laughed when Naomi mentioned it over coffee one Wednesday morning. "Some people are just like that, honey. Not everyone wants to be neighborly. Maybe he's been hurt before. Maybe he's one of those city people who think everyone's trying to get something from them." "I just want to be kind," Naomi had said, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "Is that so strange?" "To some people, yes. To people who have forgotten what kindness looks like, or who never knew it in the first place, genuine goodness seems suspicious. They cannot imagine someone doing something without wanting something back." Celia was 67, a retired school principal, with snow-white hair and a direct manner that Naomi appreciated. "You are a good soul, Naomi. But you cannot force your goodness on someone who has locked themselves away. Sometimes you just have to step back and pray from a distance." Naomi had nodded, but something in her resisted that advice. She thought about the parable of the persistent widow, the woman who kept knocking until the judge finally relented. She thought about how love was supposed to be patient, supposed to keep no record of wrongs. She touched her grandmother's cross and decided she would continue being kind, even if Victor Salazar continued rejecting it. So, she prayed for him. Every morning in her journal she wrote his name. "Victor Salazar, my neighbor. Whatever pain he carries, whatever wall he has built around his heart, I ask that it might soften, that he might find peace, that he might know he is not alone." She did not know what she was praying for exactly, only that it felt important, felt necessary. October arrived with its rush of cooling air and turning leaves. Naomi raked the leaves from both their yards when the big oak trees shed their golden burden, piling them neatly at the curb for collection. Victor Salazar did not thank her, though she saw him watching from his window once. She did not mind. She would have raked the leaves anyway. The block party came and went. Children ran through the streets with glow sticks as dusk fell. Neighbors shared dishes and stories and laughter. Victor Salazar's house remained dark, curtains drawn. Naomi saved a plate of food and walked it over anyway, leaving it on his porch with a note. "In case you get hungry later, no pressure, Naomi." When she checked the next morning, the plate was still there, untouched. She retrieved it quietly, saying nothing. She mentioned Victor Salazar to her daughter Rebecca the following Sunday when they shared lunch after services. "There is a sadness in him," Naomi said, cutting her chicken carefully. "I can see it in his eyes when he looks at me. It is not anger exactly, though he seems angry. It is something deeper, like he is carrying something very heavy." Rebecca, who had her father's practical nature tempered by her mother's compassion, frowned thoughtfully. "Maybe you should stop trying so hard, Mom. Some people want to be left alone. You might be making him uncomfortable." "Perhaps," Naomi admitted. "But what if he needs someone to keep trying? What if everyone else has already given up on him, and I am the only person still knocking? Then that is his loss, not yours," Rebecca said gently. "You cannot save everyone. You cannot fix everyone. Sometimes people have to want to be helped." Naomi had nodded, but said nothing more. She knew Rebecca was probably right. She knew she was likely being foolish, wasting kindness on someone who did not want it. But something in her, some stubborn thread of faith, insisted she keep trying. November brought the first hard frost. Naomi's garden died overnight, the tomato plants blackening and collapsing. She spent a cold morning pulling up the dead plants, composting what she could, preparing the beds for winter. As she worked, she noticed movement next door. Victor Salazar was standing on his back porch, smoking a cigarette. He looked terrible, she realized. Thinner than before, his face gaunt and grey. He was coughing, harsh, rattling sounds that carried across the yards. She walked to the fence that separated their properties. "Mr. Salazar, are you all right? That cough sounds serious." He had looked at her with something like hatred. "Mind your own business, Mrs. Brennan. I do not need your concern or your prayers or whatever it is you think you are offering." The words had hit her like a slap. She had actually stepped backward, shocked by the venom in his voice. "I am sorry," she managed. "I was only worried." "Well, do not be. I neither want nor need your worry. In fact, I would appreciate it if you would stop hovering around my property like some kind of vulture waiting for me to collapse so you can swoop in and save me. I do not want to be saved. I do not want to be your project or your good deed for the day. Is that clear enough for you?" Naomi had nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She had turned and walked back to her house, fighting tears. Inside, she had sat at her kitchen table and let herself cry, not because his words had hurt her pride exactly, but because she had heard the pain beneath them, the raw wound that made him lash out. He was suffering, and she could not help him. That realization broke something in her. She had opened her prayer journal and written slowly, "Victor Salazar, I do not understand what you need or what you want. I do not know how to help you, but I am here, and I will keep being here, even if you never want me to be." She had closed the journal and sat in silence, feeling tired and foolish and human. 2 days later, her friend Celia called. "Naomi, I need to talk to you about something. Can I come over?" "Of course. I will put on coffee." Celia arrived 20 minutes later, and they sat in Naomi's living room, the space warmed by afternoon sunlight filtering through sheer curtains. Celia held her coffee cup with both hands and looked serious. "I have been thinking about your neighbor situation, about Mr. Salazar. What about it? Have you considered that perhaps he does not want your help because he has something to hide, or because he is involved in something he does not want you to see?" Naomi blinked, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I mean that sometimes people avoid connection because they are doing things they should not be doing. Maybe he is involved in something illegal or immoral. Maybe he sees your faith and your kindness as a threat to whatever he has going on." "I do not think that is it," Naomi said slowly, though doubt crept in. "How do you know? You do not know this man. He could be anyone. He could be dangerous." Celia leaned forward. "I am not trying to make you paranoid, honey. I am just saying that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is protect yourself. Not everyone wants to be saved, and not everyone deserves the energy you are putting into them." Naomi had thought about that conversation for days afterward. Was she being naive? Was she putting herself at risk for someone who might genuinely be dangerous? She prayed about it, turning the questions over and over like stones worn smooth by water. In the end, she decided to trust her instincts. Victor Salazar was not dangerous. He was wounded, and she would continue to pray for him, even if she stopped trying to approach him directly. So she did. She stopped knocking on his door, stopped offering help he clearly did not want. But every morning, she wrote his name in her journal. Every evening she prayed for him. She watched his house from a respectful distance, noting the lights burning late into the night, the way he seemed to move more slowly each week, the way his car stayed parked for days at a time. December arrived with unseasonable warmth, a strange, mild stretch that had everyone confused. Naomi decorated her house modestly for Christmas, stringing lights around her porch and placing a simple wreath on her door. Victor Salazar's house remained undecorated, dark and closed. On a Tuesday evening, 2 weeks before Christmas, someone knocked on Naomi's door. She was washing dishes, her hands sudsy and warm, and she dried them quickly before answering. She expected perhaps a delivery driver or a neighbor collecting for some charity. Instead, she found herself face to face with her friend Margaret Wells from church. But the woman in the image before her was not Margaret. It was someone else entirely. Standing on her porch in the golden light of early evening was a woman Naomi recognized from the neighborhood but did not know well. Her name was Caroline something, she thought. Caroline worked at the hospital, was a nurse or maybe a doctor. She was perhaps in her late 30s, with dark professional clothing and a kind but tired face. Behind her, the sky was painted in shades of amber and rose, the last light of day catching on white siding and blue-painted window frames. "Mrs. Brennan?" The woman's voice was soft, uncertain. "Yes. Can I help you? I'm sorry to bother you. My name is Caroline Mitchell. I live 3 houses down. I'm a nurse at County General Hospital." She paused, seeming to gather courage. "I need to talk to you about your neighbor, Mr. Salazar." Naomi felt her heart constrict. "Is he all right? May I come in? This is not really a conversation for the porch." Naomi stepped back, gesturing Caroline inside. They moved to the living room, where Caroline perched on the edge of the couch, declining offered coffee or tea. She looked at Naomi with a mixture of respect and sadness. "Mr. Salazar is very sick," Caroline said without preamble. "He has been my patient for the past 3 months. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. He refused most treatment, refused to tell anyone, refused help of any kind. He told me once that he had no family, no friends, no one who would care if he lived or died." She paused, her voice catching slightly. "He told me you had tried to be kind to him, that you had kept trying even when he was cruel to you." Naomi sat down slowly, processing this information. Cancer. Stage 4. That explained the weight loss, the terrible cough, the grey pallor of his skin. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because he is dying. Maybe weeks, maybe days. He is alone in that house and he is scared, though he would never admit it. I have been checking on him when I can, but I work long shifts and I cannot be there all the time." Caroline looked directly at Naomi, her dark eyes serious. "He mentioned you kept praying for him. He said it annoyed him, knowing someone was praying for him when he did not want it, but I could tell it also meant something to him, even if he would not say so." "What do you need from me?" Naomi asked quietly. "I do not know, honestly. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. I just thought you should know what is happening, in case—" She trailed off. "In case he changes his mind about wanting help," Naomi finished. Caroline nodded. "I have seen people face death in many ways, Mrs. Brennan. Some go peacefully, surrounded by love. Others go angry and alone, fighting until the very end. Mr. Salazar is choosing to go alone, and it breaks my heart. But I cannot force him to accept help. No one can. I just thought maybe if someone was aware, if someone was still out there caring even from a distance, it might make a difference, even if he never knows it." They talked for a few more minutes, Caroline giving Naomi her phone number in case of emergency. When she left, Naomi stood on her porch, long after the nurse's car had driven away, watching as darkness settled over the neighborhood. Victor Salazar's house was lit by a single lamp, visible through the front window. She could see his shadow moving slowly across the room, a spectre of a man already half gone. She went inside and opened her prayer journal, but for a long time she could not write anything. Her hand hovered over the page, pen trembling. Finally she wrote simply, "Victor, I am so sorry. I am so sorry you are alone. I am so sorry you are afraid. Please let me help, please." But she did not knock on his door. She respected his explicit wishes, even as it tore at her to do so. She waited, praying each morning with increased urgency, watching his house for any sign that he might need her. Days passed. Christmas approached. Naomi went through the motions of holiday preparation, but her heart was heavy. She thought constantly about the man dying alone next door, about how he had chosen this isolation, about how she could not penetrate the walls he had built. She felt helpless and frustrated and heartbroken all at once. Rebecca noticed during their Sunday lunch. "Mom, what is wrong? You have been distracted all through church and now through our meal." Naomi told her about Caroline's visit, about Victor's cancer, about the terrible knowledge that someone was dying in pain just yards away and she could do nothing to help. Rebecca reached across the table and took her mother's hand. "Mom, you cannot force someone to accept grace. You have tried. You have been kind even when he was cruel. You have prayed for him faithfully. That is all you can do. The rest is up to him." "But what if he waits too long?" Naomi whispered. "What if he dies before he lets anyone in?" "Then that is his choice," Rebecca said gently. "As much as it hurts, that is his choice. You cannot save him from himself." That conversation haunted Naomi. She knew Rebecca was right, but the knowledge provided no comfort. She increased her prayers to several times daily, found herself waking at night to pray for Victor Salazar, for his pain to ease, for his heart to soften, for him to not die alone and afraid. 3 days before Christmas, at 10:30 at night, someone knocked on her door. Naomi was in her pajamas and robe, reading her Bible before bed. The knock was loud, urgent, not the polite tap of a neighbor dropping by. She went to the door quickly, heart pounding, and looked through the peephole. Victor Salazar stood on her porch. She opened the door immediately. He looked terrible, worse than she had ever seen him. He was wearing pajamas under an overcoat, his feet in slippers. His face was the color of old wax, his eyes sunken and glittering with what might have been fever or tears or both. He was trembling violently, whether from cold or illness or emotion she could not tell. "Mr. Salazar," she breathed, "come in, please. You should not be outside in this cold." "I need—" His voice cracked. He tried again. "I need to ask you something. Anything. Come inside first." He stepped across her threshold like a man stepping onto ice he feared would crack. She guided him to her couch, where he sat down heavily, his hands shaking. She grabbed a blanket from the chair and draped it around his shoulders. He clutched it gratefully. "Can I get you something? Water? Tea?" She was already moving toward the kitchen. "No, wait, please." He looked up at her, and for the first time his guard was completely down. She saw naked fear in his eyes, raw and terrible. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "All right. Why did you keep trying to be kind to me, even after I was horrible to you, even after I told you explicitly to leave me alone? Why did you keep praying for me?" He was crying now, tears streaming down his gaunt face. "What did you want from me?" Naomi sat down slowly in the chair across from him, her mind racing. This was a pivotal moment, she realized. Her answer mattered more than perhaps anything she had ever said. She touched her grandmother's cross, felt its familiar weight. "I did not want anything from you, Mr. Salazar. I simply saw a neighbor who seemed lonely and hurting, and I wanted to offer whatever small comfort I could, not because I expected anything back, but because that is what we are called to do. To love our neighbors, to see someone suffering and refuse to look away even when they want us to." "But I was cruel to you," he said, his voice breaking. "I said terrible things." "You did," she agreed quietly, "and it hurt. But I knew the cruelty was not really about me. It was about your own pain, whatever you were carrying. So I kept praying for you because I believed you needed prayer, whether you wanted it or not." He made a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. "I have cancer. I am dying. Did you know that? I learned recently, yes. I thought if I kept everyone away, it would be easier. If I did not let anyone get close, then there would be no one to watch me fall apart, no one to pity me, no one to disappoint." He wiped his eyes roughly. "But now it is almost over, and I am terrified. I am so scared, and I'm all alone, and I do not know what happens next. I do not know if there is anything beyond this, or if I'm just going to cease to exist, and the thought of that is—" He could not continue. Naomi felt tears streaming down her own face. "You are not alone right now," she said softly. "I know. That is why I came. I do not have the right to ask this. I have been nothing but terrible to you. But I do not have anyone else, and I—" His voice dropped to a whisper. "Would you pray for me? Not from your house, not from a distance. Here, now, with me. Please." The word hung in the air between them, this desperate plea from a dying man who had spent months pushing her away. Naomi did not hesitate. She stood and moved to the couch, sitting beside him. She took his cold hands in her warm ones. "Of course I will," she said. "Of course. I do not know how," he admitted. "I have never really prayed. I do not know what to say or how to say it. That is all right. You do not need to say anything. Just be here. Just listen." She squeezed his hands gently. "Close your eyes if you want to." He did, and she began to pray aloud. Not a formal prayer, not something memorized or rehearsed, but simple words from her heart. She prayed for peace, to settle over Victor like a blanket. She prayed for his pain to ease. She prayed for him to feel the presence of love surrounding him, even in his darkest moments. She prayed for him to know he was valued, he was seen, he was not alone. She prayed for courage to face what was coming. She prayed for mercy and grace and comfort. As she prayed, she felt Victor's hands tighten around hers. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. She kept praying, her voice steady and sure, pouring out all the words she had been speaking over him for months from the privacy of her own home, all the love she had been trying to offer that he had rejected. Now he was receiving it, soaking it in like a man dying of thirst, finally allowed to drink. When she finished, they sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Victor spoke, his voice hoarse but calmer. "Thank you. I do not have better words than that. Just thank you." "You are welcome," Naomi said simply. He looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time. "I have wasted so much time being angry, being afraid, pushing away the only person who tried to care. It is not wasted if you are here now," Naomi said gently. "We cannot change the past, Mr. Salazar. We can only move forward from where we are." "Victor," he said. "Please call me Victor." "Victor," she agreed. "And I am Naomi." They talked for 2 hours that night. Victor told her about his life, about the wife who had left him 12 years earlier, about the daughter who had stopped speaking to him after their divorce, about the career in finance that had consumed him until he had no relationships left. He told her about the diagnosis, about the choices he had made to refuse aggressive treatment, about the fear that had been his constant companion. He told her about the loneliness that had felt like drowning, and about how he had convinced himself it was better to be alone than to be vulnerable. Naomi listened without judgment, offering tissues when he cried, refilling his water glass, simply being present. When he finally stood to leave, well after midnight, he looked lighter somehow, despite his obvious physical deterioration. "Can I come back?" he asked hesitantly. "Tomorrow, maybe? I do not want to be a burden, but—" "You are not a burden," Naomi said firmly. "You can come any time. My door is always open to you, Victor. Always." He nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging his throat. He squeezed her hand once and then left, walking slowly back to his own house in the cold December night. Naomi closed her door and leaned against it, trembling with exhaustion and relief and joy. She had waited so long for this, prayed so hard, and now it had finally happened. Victor had come to her, He had asked for help. The wall had finally crumbled. She opened her prayer journal and wrote simply, "He came. Thank you. He came." Victor returned the next day, and the day after that. They fell into an easy routine. He would come over in the late afternoon, and they would sit together, sometimes talking, sometimes sitting in comfortable silence. She made him soup and tea, things easy on his failing digestive system. She read to him from books she loved, passages that spoke of hope and grace and beauty. She prayed with him each time he came, and slowly, haltingly, he began to pray too, speaking his own words into the quiet, offering up his fears and regrets and faint, fragile hopes. He met Rebecca when she visited for Christmas dinner. Victor had been hesitant, not wanting to intrude on family time, but Naomi had insisted. Rebecca was shocked by his appearance, but hid it well, treating him with warmth and gentle humor. They had a small feast, the three of them around Naomi's dining room table, and for a few hours it felt like family. "I do not deserve this," Victor said quietly at one point, looking around the table at the food and decorations and the faces of these two women who had opened their home to him. "None of us deserve grace," Naomi said gently. "That is what makes it grace." Caroline, the nurse, visited on Christmas Eve. She was stunned to find Victor at Naomi's house, even more stunned to see how much calmer he seemed, how some of the terror had left his eyes. She pulled Naomi aside in the kitchen. "Whatever you are doing, it is making a difference," Caroline said. "I have watched patients die in many ways, but this—" She gestured toward the living room where Victor sat, looking at Naomi's modest Christmas tree. "This is the best possible version of a terrible situation. He is not alone anymore. You gave him that." "He gave himself that," Naomi corrected. "He had to choose to accept help. I just kept the door open." New Year came and went. Victor grew weaker. By mid-January, he could no longer walk to Naomi's house on his own. She began going to him instead, spending hours each day at his bedside, reading, praying, holding his hand. Hospice nurses came and went, managing his pain with medications that made him drift in and out of consciousness. But whenever he was lucid, he looked for Naomi, and she was always there. On a Tuesday morning in late January, with weak winter sunlight filtering through curtains, Victor Salazar took his last breaths. Naomi was sitting beside him, holding his hand, praying softly. He opened his eyes one final time and looked at her. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice barely audible, "for not giving up on me." "Never," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Never, Victor." He smiled, just a slight upturn of his lips, and then he was gone. Naomi sat with him for a long time afterward, still holding his hand, still praying, feeling the weight of his departure and the grace of his final months. At his small funeral service, attended by only a handful of people, Naomi spoke. She told the truth about their difficult beginning, about his rejections, about her persistence, about the miracle of his final surrender. She spoke about how grace often arrives in the least expected moments, how love sometimes has to knock 100 times before the door finally opens, how it is never too late to accept the gift of connection. "Victor taught me something important," she said, standing at the front of the small chapel. "He taught me that our kindness matters, even when it seems rejected, that prayers spoken in the dark are still heard, that walls built over decades can still crumble in a single moment of desperate need. He taught me that grace is patient, far more patient than we are, and that it waits for us, no matter how long we try to hide." She touched her grandmother's cross as she spoke, feeling its familiar weight, knowing that 3 generations of praying women had worn this symbol of faith before her. She thought about all the prayers she had prayed over Victor, all the mornings she had written his name in her journal, even when it seemed pointless. Not one of those prayers had been wasted. Not one. After the service, an older woman approached Naomi, someone she did not recognize. The woman had silver hair and tired eyes, and she looked at Naomi with a mixture of gratitude and grief. "I am Victoria," she said. Victor's ex-wife. I heard about what you did for him, how you cared for him at the end. Her voice broke. I left him 12 years ago because he would not let me in, would not let anyone in. I gave up trying, I stopped knocking, and I have regretted it every day since. When I heard he was sick, I tried to reach out, but he would not answer my calls. I thought, she wiped her eyes, I thought he would die alone and angry, and I would carry that guilt forever. But you kept trying. You did not give up. You gave him the grace I could not give him, and I just wanted to say thank you. Naomi took the woman's hands in hers. He spoke of you near the end, with regret, yes, but also with love. He never stopped loving you. He just did not know how to show it. Victoria wept, and Naomi held her, this stranger who was connected to her through the complicated web of Victor's life. They stood together in the church vestibule, two women who had both tried to love a difficult man, both succeeding and failing in different ways. Later, after everyone had left, Naomi stood alone in the empty church. She looked at the simple casket at the front, at the few flowers arranged beside it. Not many people had come to say goodbye to Victor Salazar. He had lived a life isolated by choice and circumstance, but at the end he had not been alone. At the end he had let someone in. At the end, grace had found him. She thought about the image that she would carry forward, the moment that had crystallized everything. That first evening, when Victor had knocked on her door, broken and terrified, and finally willing to be vulnerable. The way he had looked at her with desperate hope when he asked her to pray. The way his hands had trembled in hers. That was the moment everything changed, the moment the wall finally crumbled, the moment grace stopped being an unwanted intrusion and became a welcomed embrace. Naomi walked out of the church into the cold January afternoon. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, the same colors that had illuminated her porch that evening when Caroline had come to tell her about Victor's illness. She thought about all the evenings since, all the prayers, all the tears, all the small moments of connection that had built something precious in the midst of dying. She touched her grandmother's cross and smiled through her tears. Victor Salazar had taught her something she would never forget. That persistence in love matters, that prayers spoken faithfully, even when they seem to bounce off closed doors, are still heard, that it is never too late for grace, that the hardest hearts can crack open when faced with genuine, patient, unconditional love. She drove home as darkness fell, feeling tired but peaceful. Her house would be empty tonight, as it had been empty so many nights before. But tomorrow she would wake and pray, and she would write names in her journal, and she would keep offering kindness to neighbors who might reject it, because that was what love did. Love kept showing up. Love kept knocking. Love waited patiently for the door to finally open, even if it took years, even if it hurt, even if the opening came only in the final, desperate moments before everything ended. And sometimes, when you knocked long enough, when you prayed faithfully enough, when you loved persistently enough despite all the rejections and the walls and the anger, sometimes the door finally opened. Sometimes grace broke through. Sometimes the coldest heart thawed just enough to let the light in. Sometimes in the end love won,